6 Degrees of History, this time from Henry IV to Henry Ford. Henry IV became King of England in 1399. He was also the subject of 2 plays written by William Shakespeare, who also wrote Julius Caesar, a tragedy that once starred an actor named John Wilkes Booth, who would later use his position as a performer to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, whose life was portrayed in a 1915 film produced by Thomas Edison, who founded the Edison Illuminating Company, which eventually hired a chief engineer named Henry Ford. And there you have it, history made 1 degree at a time. 6 Degrees of History, this time from Mozart to go-karts. Mozart was a musical child prodigy who wrote his first symphony at 8. He inspired Beethoven, the deaf composer who dedicated a symphony to Napoleon, who sold Louisiana to the U.S., leading to westward expansion and causing the Mexican-American War, where the U.S. won the territory of California, the 31st state of the Union, and home to Art Ingalls, who used a lawnmower engine to build the very first go-kart. And there you have it, history made 1 degree at a time. 6 Degrees of History, this time from Attila the Hun to Area 51. Attila led a barbarian army against the Roman Empire, which eventually stopped him at Thermopylae in Greece, which also hosted the famous battle between 300 Spartans and Persia, an event documented by Herodotus, the historian who lent his name to a crater on the moon, which was reached in 1969 by NASA, the agency created during the administration of President Eisenhower, who authorized spy planes to be tested at the mysterious base known as Area 51. And there you have it, history made 1 degree at a time. 6 Degrees of History, this time from Joan of Arc to Yellowstone Park. Joan of Arc was burned at the stake, but was later honored by the Catholic Church in Notre Dame Cathedral, which was also the setting of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, written by Victor Hugo, who also wrote Les Miserables, which was first published in America during the Civil War on the same day of the First Battle of Chattanooga, the battleground where Confederates were defeated 2 years later by General Ulysses S. Grant, who would later be elected president and sign into law the establishment of Yellowstone National Park. And there you have it, history made 1 degree at a time. 6 Degrees of History, this time from Teddy Roosevelt to UFOs. When Teddy Roosevelt was shot in the chest, his life was saved when the bullet hit his eyeglasses case. Glasses were invented in Venice, which was also the birthplace of Marco Polo, the famous explorer who toured Kublai Khan's palace called Xanadu, which was also the mansion in Citizen Kane starring Orson Welles, whose broadcast of the War of the Worlds ignited America's fascination with UFOs. And there you have it, history made 1 degree at a time. 6 Degrees of History, this time from Genghis Khan to the Pentagon. The Mongolian Emperor Genghis Khan controlled most of the Silk Road, the trade route used by Marco Polo, who wrote a book about his adventures in Asia called The Travels, which Christopher Columbus took with him to the New World. Columbus Day would later be named an American holiday by President Benjamin Harrison, who had recruited soldiers to fight the Confederate Army of Robert E. Lee, whose estate was the original site of the military complex that would become the Pentagon. And there you have it, history made 1 degree at a time. 6 Degrees of History, this time from Lewis and Clark to mac and cheese. Lewis and Clark were sent to explore the American West by President Thomas Jefferson, whose memorial in Washington, D.C. was planned by Frederick Olmsted Jr., whose own father designed New York City's Central Park, where the famous Great Lawn was finally completed in 1937, the same year James Lewis Kraft introduced the very first box version of mac and cheese. And there you have it, history made 1 degree at a time.